Hey everyone, this is 5x5. I'm Simo and welcome back to the channel. So everyone's talking about the Joker again. Came out a couple months ago, but the Oscar nominations for this year have come out and Joker has 11 nominations. So this is a perfect excuse to come back to the movie and sort of do a review from before I had a channel. Let's start by letting you know that I am going to be discussing spoilers. I will let you know where I start to talk about spoilers. I will give you a spoiler warning. So for now, I'll speak in general terms and give you sort of my general impression of the movie and what I think of it. And when we get to the point where I start talking about specific spoilers, then I'll let you know. So first off, my first impressions of the movie are, it's a beautiful movie. Visually, the set design is fantastic. The costume design is fantastic. The cinematography, the lighting, the camera work. It's all beautiful. The nature of the movie, the nature of the subject matter of the movie is mental health. Even though it's a supervillain Joker movie, it's very much a character study of mental health. Because of that, it could very easily become a very heavy, awful viewing experience. So I really appreciated that they made an effort to counterbalance and contrast the heavy topic of the movie with uplifting visual elements like bright colors in the costumes and bright lighting. If they had taken a more dark and edgy and serious approach to the movie like they have in previous DC movies, it would have been soul-crushing to watch, I guess. I guess that's my first impression. Joaquin Phoenix does a fantastic job in the role of the Joker. There's never a moment where you think it's some actor playing a crazy person. He's believable from the very first moment you see him in this incredible, heart-wrenching role. I say it's heart-wrenching, but I'll come back to that later. It's not a sympathetic role. I will say that too. I will disagree with any critic that accuses the movie of painting villains like this in a positive light and making them sort of redeemable, because right off the top, this character is not redeemable and they do not make an attempt to make this character redeemable. It's something that I was really worried about going in, and I was happy to see that that's not what happened. The writing is all over the place in this movie. It's trying really hard to do a meaningful, substantive character study of mental health and mental health awareness as a theme of the movie. But at the same time, it's trying to sort of slip it through the back door of a big profile superhero movie, because superhero movies are all the rage in Hollywood, right? So in some ways that's really fantastic because you get to talk about something that's really serious. And in another way, I mean, marrying it to a otherwise light topic like the superhero genre, it does kind of cripple the movie in some ways by limiting the audience that will see the movie and see the critique that's happening in the movie, and also limit the audience that gets exposed to the message of the movie, which is a message of basically awareness of mental health issues. Because of the two sort of genres that are happening, they're kind of in conflict with each other. The movie really, it doesn't know what it wants to be at times. It doesn't want to be a character study, or does it want to be a superhero movie? And I think because of the two genres sort of clashing substantively, you're going to have an audience that's going to be really divided, which is why you've probably seen a lot of criticism for the movie, but a lot of like sort of vitriol against the movie as well. Because you're going to have some people that are really there for a superhero movie, and they don't want all of the sort of inherent political critique that comes in the backdrop of this movie due to the subject matter. And they're just there for a popcorn flick. So automatically there's going to be some sort of backlash from that perspective. And from the other perspective, you're going to have some people that are very, very politically engaged and socially engaged and very aware of mental health issues. And they're going to really appreciate the movie for what it does for mental health issues, because it really explores them in a way that I don't remember has ever been filmed in a mainstream Hollywood movie, to my knowledge. I mean, there's probably something. I'm not like the biggest cinephile, but I don't remember seeing anything so mainstream covering it. So this does put a lot of eyes on the issue. Because of the two, competing genres and competing audiences' needs, basically, as an audience, you're going to have to decide if this movie is really for you and what you're there for. I don't think that there's inherently a lot of overlap between the two different audiences. There's for sure some, there's always some, but I don't think that in general there's a lot. So the other thing I would say is that this is just not an easy movie to watch. It's a heavy long slog. And because it has decided to be a character study and root itself in some hyper-realism, it does take all of the joy out of the superhero character aspect of the movie. It's not a fun movie to watch. You're not going to leave this movie feeling good about your life and feeling happy, and I don't think you're really gonna love this movie. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but it's complicated. I guess it's complicated. So you'll have to decide for yourself if this movie is for you and if you quote unquote like it. Like I said, the movie is it's a character study of mental illness. It's told within the lens of a superhero movie. Superficially, it could appear as though the Joker is being framed as a sympathetic character, but I would push back against that. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think, if anything, the movie is creating a sympathetic approach to people who suffer from mental illness in general, but not this specific character. I don't think it's a spoiler to say, by the end of the movie, the Joker has done some bad things, right? No one's walking out of this movie thinking, oh yeah, I feel sorry for him, he's a hero. He's not. He might be the protagonist of a movie, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the hero of the movie, because he's not. And the movie doesn't try to paint him as a hero at any point. Yeah, he's the protagonist. The audience follows his adventure, but that's really where it ends. The sympathy that he's engendered while you're watching really comes from painting a general background of the failures of society around him and how those failures have created the situation that this character is living through, and how that spirals into shaping him as a person, if this character is a real person, right? So you don't feel sympathy for this character, the Joker, Arthur Fleck. You feel sympathetic for anyone that has to go through all of those things. And if you're feeling anything, you're understanding how it's possible that if all those things happen to somebody, you can see how they would break someone and destroy them and lead them into a direction of mental illness and even criminality. You don't feel sympathy for him as a person and what he did, but you feel sympathy for anyone who's a victim of the circumstances and the system that created him. I think that's an important nuanced distinction to me. Leaning into the issue of mental illness here was a really interesting choice. I guess Todd Phillips really wanted to ground the movie in reality, and he wanted to do something meaningful, probably as a public service. But it actually does lean itself really well to the source material in a sense, because it has the added benefit of exploring the age-old question of why Batman doesn't just kill the Joker, or any of his rogue gallery, actually. All of his rogues suffer from different forms of mental illness, and fans have followed Batman, and critics have wondered why he doesn't, well, some critics anyway, have wondered why he doesn't just kill the Joker or kill the Penguin or kill the Riddler and just be done with it. This movie does a really good job of showing how characters like this and people like this are really just victims of a flawed and failing system. Once you see it from that lens, you realize why Batman doesn't kill them, why he doesn't kill the Joker, and why he returns them to Arkham Asylum every time. This really answers that question, because you do see the circumstances that created Arthur Fleck and the Joker. And if Todd Phillips were to go back and do another movie and explore another villain, say for example Poison Ivy, who's like a famous crazy scientist / eco-terrorist, it's a lot easier to imagine that she could be explored as someone who's just deeply disturbed but has strong feelings about what's going on with the world around us in terms of climate change. That's a really easy one to explore right now. And exploring something like that answers the question. This is why Batman doesn't kill his rogues, because he understands that the system has failed these characters, or if they're real, these people. Right? He understands the systemic failures, and he brings them back to the hospital in the hopes that they can't be redeemed, but maybe they can be rehabilitated and they can turn their lives around with the proper help and the proper treatment. On the other hand, I think the movie does a shallow criticism of late-stage capitalism. The movie is using Gotham as a setting in the late 70s, early 80s, and We know from news that's going on in the background of scenes and that the city is facing public servant strikes. Specifically, the garbage collection has gone on strike, so garbage isn't being picked up, and you'll see that in the sets of a lot of the scenes outdoors. You'll see massive garbage bags piling up in the alleyways and in the streets, and it does create this gritty setting of the city. But as the movie rolls on, you find out that the city isn't just cutting funds to garbage collection, it's cutting funds to social services. So, for example, Arthur is seeing a social worker, and later you'll find out that a number of other social services are being cut too. So it does a shallow critique of this because it shows you these cuts are happening, but it really doesn't discuss any of the reasons why those cuts are happening. So, I mean, we all know if you don't pay the garbage men, they don't come and pick up your garbage, but it also works for everything else too. If you don't pay the police, they don't arrest people. If you don't pay the ambulance people, they don't come and pick you up when you're sick. These are all social services. They're all socialized services. And we tend to forget that they are socialism. They're a form of socialism. Our taxes pay for the roads and infrastructure of any major urbanized city, well, any city or town in any way. Fire services, same thing. So the movie points out that cuts have been made to these services, and they're coming to an end because people aren't going to work for free. But it doesn't talk about any of the politics and the mentality behind that. I can see why Todd Phillips did that, or at least I can speculate why. Because he's trying to avoid getting into a position where he's boxed in as either a liberal or conservative. He wants to use these issues as a backdrop for his movie and paint the city of Gotham with some flavor and depth, but without him getting into the mindset of the people that are making these choices and cutting these services. It's doing a disservice to the issues themselves, and you can come to the conclusion that you understand it and you know why he's kind of straddling that fence, but I feel like this kind of hurts the movie from a depth perspective and a writing perspective. That's just my take, though. You might have a different take. Exploring the issue to any degree really might not matter to you. On the other side, I think in not exploring the politics of the social services cuts and Gotham and what's happening in the city around Arthur, I think in some ways it's limiting, but in other ways there is a point that I can see in support of handling it that way, and that's that by not having a macro understanding of what's happening around Gotham, you're really looking at these cuts from the perspective of your protagonist, since he's not going to have a richer, deeper understanding of the systems around him. So in a way, it helps keep the audience laser focused on being in the perspective and the experience of the protagonist. So in that way, I can see it. I can see the justification for keeping the field of vision this narrow. But one thing Phillips does is he does an exceptional job of pointing out how uncomfortable society is around people with mental illness and how they handle them as a result of that, especially when he's around young children. There's a few scenes in the movie where he's around young children and it's automatically uncomfortable. I think he's playing up on our anxieties there. I think he's also tapping into society's anxiety about having adult men around young children that they don't know as well, which comes from some inherent homophobia. I know that's an interesting take that some of you might not have considered, but society does have a problem with having adult men around other young children that are not their own children. And I think he's knowingly tapping into it, so he doesn't have to sort of do a lot of work to explain why these characters are just treating Arthur the way they are. It's just a given that, well, he's an adult male, he shouldn't be around young children. And instead of sort of detailing that and giving any airtime to explaining why that is, he's just kind of tapping into that social anxiety of that truth. Excuse me, I am sick. So from here on in, we're talking spoilers. This is your spoiler warning. So later in the film, it's revealed that Penny Fleck, Arthur's mother, has been struggling with clinical delusions and mental health issues herself her entire adult life from the sounds of it. This has directly impacted Arthur's life from childhood on. She had a husband or boyfriend that abused Arthur, and because of her own delusions, she didn't prevent that from happening. He does have some brain damage, and that's actually directly why he has a crazy Joker laugh, which is an interesting way of explaining it. The revelation is really tragic and humanizing for all of the characters in the movie, really. It doesn't create sympathy for Arthur, really, but it really does help the audience understand him and how he got to where he is, and at least be compassionate towards him, which is, I think, a good thing. I do think understanding mental illness from a different perspective than what we've seen in movies over the decades is a good thing here. So, but simultaneously it does something else too. The movie deals with Arthur interacting with Thomas Wayne, and Penny Fleck is repeatedly trying to reach out and contact Thomas Wayne, who is of course Bruce Wayne's father. And in framing Penny and Arthur as basically people who are victims or suffering from mental illness and issues that should be treated, it simultaneously frames Thomas Wayne as an asshole who's completely unsympathetic for what they're going through. He's aware of what they're going through, but ultimately he doesn't care. He's just the financial elite, and he's not helping to get his former employee into treatment or make sure she's taken care of or anything like that. He feels no responsibility towards her. And depending on where how you feel on the political spectrum and as a personal ideology, you may or may not agree with that. But it does actually make you question previous canon of Thomas Wayne being a super wealthy philanthropist and general great guy. And it does challenge the idea that the Waynes are actually a really compassionate couple who raised an incredible son before they were killed. And it challenges the idea that these people are amazing people to live up to and protecting over the years. That sort of image of his angelic parents, it certainly humanizes them as well and paints them as less inspiring figures. So one of the things that we learn is that Penny is under the belief, because of her delusions, that she had an affair with Thomas Wayne, and that Thomas Wayne is the father of Arthur. So Penny has been petitioning Thomas Wayne for child support for years, and Wayne has been ultimately ignoring them. So it goes back to really contrasting this Thomas Wayne as a less compassionate, philanthropic, nice rich guy that was doing for the community and for the city, which very much goes against every other characterization of the Waynes over the last 85 years. So you may or may not appreciate that. I suspect that you probably won't appreciate it. On the other hand, you could argue that seeing as the movie is from Arthur Fleck's perspective, he's an unreliable narrator. So you can always sort of backtrack and backpedal on all of this story and say, well, this is just more of Arthur's delusions himself, and the Waynes aren't really like that. None of this really happened, and nothing matters. The universe is a whole lie. So in that case, it's cleverly written so that there's plausible deniability on anything anyone decides to hold the writing accountable for here. I also didn't like the use of the Waynes as a setup for the Joker character. Ultimately, when things go south, the Joker ends up setting off a series of events that ultimately lead to the death of the Waynes and the creation of Bruce Wayne becoming Batman ultimately. So the events are all connected, and it was sort of a backdoor way of doing that. But that's not really new. We've seen that in a couple stories in the past as well. But what I didn't like about this here, and I think it's also true of the TV show Gotham that came out, is by trying to do this and take liberties with the canon, you're breaking the relationship between the Joker and between Bruce Wayne or Batman. I mean, this Joker would literally be like 30 years old, and Bruce Wayne would be 30 years younger than him or 24 years younger than him. So by the time Bruce Wayne is 30 and in his prime ready to fight the Joker is going to be a fragile 60-year-old. So there's no potential for them to ever face off against each other in any meaningful way. So what's the point? I don't believe that anyone wants to have a Joker without a Batman. That's just my feeling. It makes me wonder why anybody would try and make a movie like this other than just to cash in on the brand, which is a valid reason if you're making the movie to make money. So for my final thoughts, I'm going to give the movie a 3.5 out of 5. I don't think the movie is for everyone. It is a long, difficult, serious slog. It's not a joyful movie. I think some audiences are really going to be here for what the movie has to offer, and other audiences are not going to be on board. So I don't know you. You're going to have to decide for yourself if you think the movie is worth your time. I do think that you will respect the work that went into the movie, regardless of if you enjoyed the movie or not, though. I do think that the movie takes all the joy and the fun out of a character like the Joker and the superhero genre, so I really don't want to see similar takes on superhero movies like this, but that's just my perspective. I think if Todd Phillips spent more time fleshing out the politics of Gotham and why the city is falling apart and crumbling and the city's leadership is making the choices that it does, I think it would have been a richer, more substantive movie. I don't know if it would still be a good superhero genre movie, but I do think it would push it over the top from being like, okay, this is an okay or decent movie, to being an excellent critique of social systems and our treatment as society of the mentally ill. But in its current state, I don't think it does that. So that's it for now. Let me know what you think of the review in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you want to get notified of when new videos are out, don't forget to hit the bell so you get that notification. I will see everyone soon. Take care.